Welcome to Adyen Presents Embedded Finance, real talk for SaaS leaders on embedding payments and financial products. Software platforms today are no longer just about software. Winning platforms embed payments and financial products like business loans, accounts, and cards to become full-service operating systems for customers, building loyalty and new revenue streams. Now, the opportunity is clear, and we've heard much about it, but tactics are largely undefined still. And that's why we're launching this podcast, to hear from the platforms and experts shaping the strategies. This episode dives into the importance of infrastructure for embedded finance. I'm joined by David Collie, Senior Director of Engineering at Faire, the online wholesale marketplace that connects independent brands with local retailers to help them discover and stock unique products, currently serving 19 markets across North America, Europe, and Australia. And Tom Adams, Adyen's Chief Technology Officer. First up, Tom. Welcome back to Adyen Presents Embedded Finance. Today we are joined by Adyen's newest board member, our CTO, Tom Adams. Tom, to start off with, could you maybe share with the audience a few words about yourself and the journey that took you to Adyen?
The journey. Yeah. Hi, Emma. It's great to be here. So most recently, I guess I've been at Adyen for 6 months. So it's been a whirlwind journey, trying to learn as much as I can about as much as I can, meet as many customers as I can. I kind of have been joking with people that I know enough to be dangerous now. And so that's the level of kind of depth that maybe we'll get into today. The dangerous level. Before Adyen, I worked at Cash App. I led engineering for our globally distributed team of about 1,500 engineers. Was at Block for, Cash App's a part of Block. I was at Block for 7 years. I started in Melbourne. I'm Australian from Brisbane, for anyone that knows Australia, but spent the most recent part of my life in Melbourne and kind of consider that home still. Yeah, that's the brief journey. Lots of engineering leadership, pendulum swings, for those of you that follow kind of technical leadership literature between IC leadership, ran my own startup for 6 years. That's another story we can go into if that's of interest to anybody.
Let's first start off at Block. Looking at your new role, what are the lessons that you take away from there to implement here at Adyen?
From Block to Adyen? Oh, that's a great question. I think Block was maybe slightly larger than Adyen. Cash App was a similar size. So I think the lessons are very similar. I guess one of the differences, Cash App was a consumer company or a consumer brand. There's a difference there. A friend of mine once joked that he'd love to have a consumer company because then he could fire his customers. It's obviously a joke, but it's an interesting kind of metaphor for thinking about customers. The difference at Adyen is you know your customer, you can talk to them. That's great, right? Because you can learn a lot, you can understand their problems. And so at Cash App, you're kind of dealing with scale. So you're just dealing with tens of millions of users, and you're trying to segment them or bucket them and understand their behavior. We don't have to do that. We can actually go out and live talk to customers. I talked to 2 yesterday. I talked to 1 on Monday. I'm talking to 1 this afternoon. So it's great that you can do that and you can learn. The flip side is they have your phone number and they call you. And so there's a level of
familiar with that.
Yeah, there's a level of expectation, right? And that's both great. And that's something that we take very seriously. So there's lots of lessons I think that you can learn from running a large scale technical organization, from reliability, uptime, quality, how you think about productivity of your teams, how we think about the work that we're doing that are directly applicable to the work here at Adyen. But they're different cultures and we're serving different kinds of customers. And it's okay if Cash App's, it's not okay, but it's more tolerable if Cash App's down for some period of time. It's not okay if Adyen's down, right? So
absolutely. Just pivoting from that, seeing as you've successfully led engineering organizations now in many different contexts, if you were the CTO of a software platform, for example, knowing their arena, what are some things that come to mind that you would prioritize above all others, or that would be especially important?
I think reliability is probably top of the list. Ease of integration. So how quickly can you get up and running? How easy is it to test things out? Reliability, I think, as a SaaS provider, you're kind of at the mercy in a lot of ways to your vendors or your partners, depending on how you want to look at them. And so understanding who you can call upon and having somebody in that arena with you that has your back is critically important. And so I felt that at Cash App, we did a lot of driving and our partners were kind of following in our slipstream. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about Adyen. Like, we're not necessarily just following, say, one customer, we're following many, many customers. And so we have the benefit of like that aggregate experience, and we can take the best parts of that and we can provide a great platform to our merchants.
Absolutely. And if you look at the core audience of a SaaS platform, it's a small, mid-sized business or owner group. It's not entirely dissimilar from a consumer audience. If you look at your experience in Cash App from an engineering perspective, we're together running a software platform, we're building for a fantastic SMB experience. What then on the engineering side should we prioritize or hold holy above all things?
That's a really interesting question. My honest engineering answer, you'll get this answer from anyone in engineering, is it depends. Like that's the first answer you get from any engineer. And I think that it depends. It depends on your customer segment. It depends on what needs you're solving, right? So you could potentially optimize user experience or customer experience. I think, ease of use is definitely important, but the space that we play in, like the game that we play, is payments, and it's like global money movement. And so you need to prioritize reliability, timeliness, all of those kind of attributes above all else. And so again, if you're playing in that platform space, if you are a platform, I think those are the things that are important as well.
Sort of fulfilling your core promise.
In the end, I think that it's very easy for, I'll just kind of hand wave and say platform-based businesses. And I'm not meaning platforms in the sense that we serve merchants who are platforms. I more mean any company that is offering a service as a platform to other companies, like Adyen is as well. I think any platform-based business, it's very easy to forget that you have an end customer. Like, you've got a human at the end of the loop. So it's somebody trying to purchase like a new hat or a jacket or a bag at a store. If they can't purchase that thing, that's meaningful to them. Maybe it's somebody purchasing groceries at a store in Finland, right? So these things have meaning to people and their lives. And I think it's very easy to become decoupled and desensitized to that. So you always want to be building customer empathy, not just with like Adyen's direct customers, our merchants, but also with their direct customers. So in the case of platforms, we're a couple of steps removed from that. But in the end, it's somebody at an amusement park wanting to grab a hot dog. It's somebody, buying diapers for their kid. So there's some actual human at the end of the line who it affects. And I think so empathy, customer empathy is probably the biggest thing.
That's a good take. Switching gears slightly to the realm of embedded financial products, is there anything from an engineering perspective that is especially important there? If you're a platform, say, and you've moved from a referral-based business to a business that now embeds payments, so you've already got that layer with your sub-merchant, and now you're trying to help them with working capital or give them a bank account. What sort of complexity are we talking here?
I mean, obviously, I'm going to give you the Adyen line and say we will abstract the complexity for you. But I think in general, you want to be thinking about not just what you're solving for now, but what that runway looks like and growth over time. So that growth is in a variety of dimensions. So there's growth within like your user base, so your customers who you're serving. There's also growth within like the product suite that you're offering. And so I think an integrated product suite that ties well together and brings together a bunch of different features that all work in an integrated whole is key. Because ideally, you're scaling your business and you want a partner to scale with you. So I think that's super important. Again, it's not just like pure scaling from a technical perspective, as in requests per second. It's scaling in terms of product. And then on the other side of things, we're moving money where we need to be able to reconcile. So how do we think about that holistically? How do we think about, making sure that you have the visibility into what's happening? So I think these are all key factors, but it all comes down to like a comprehensive product suite that will scale with you as you grow.
Absolutely. Now imagine these businesses, they're all quite fast growing. They're all incredibly ambitious. They exist in spaces where there's now an arms race and there's lots of consolidation to build the most sort of feature-rich offering or the most differentiated product offering, knowing that everyone's in a hurry. While you successfully built engineering teams and infrastructure for scale, are there any lessons that we can impart on these folks setting off on this journey now? Let's say they're in an attic somewhere in Sweden with pan-European ambitions. What would you tell them to keep front of mind for the next few years?
I've got that image planted in my head, Hemo. That's great. I've done that role personally a couple of times. And so it's something that's kind of close to my heart. I'm probably like a little bit away from that now in chronological age, but any small scale company is trying to offload as much of like their non-core business as possible. So focus on achieving product market fit as quickly as possible, and then focus on whatever your growth engine is. So after that, focus on like economies of scale, unit economics, et cetera. So I think if you're in that situation, depending on where you are in kind of the growth of the company, from an engineering perspective at least, you're trying to offload as much responsibility as you can to third parties.
Yep.
Engineering is all about feedback loops. So you're trying to build feedback loops at different kind of levels of granularity. So an engineer's writing code, you've got a compiler that's giving them immediate feedback. You've got a test suite that's giving you less immediate feedback, but it's in the feedback kind of realm of minutes. You've then got production or quality QA releases to test environments that are giving you longer feedback loops. You're then monitoring in production. So you've got a different thing. You're getting feedback from customers. So building these feedback loops in enables you to iterate as quickly as possible to like better support your customers. So take the things that aren't part of your core business and offload them to somebody else whose core business it is. So don't build things that you don't necessarily need. You go to these conferences, you read about all these things that like massive industry players are doing, including us. You don't need that as a small organization, right? You don't need to own your stack end to end necessarily. Focus on the things that provide differentiation and get good at those. When you need to bring those things back in-house, it's a really good problem to have because you've got scale, you've got financial capital behind you, and you've probably got people that have been there and done that and are able to execute. So again, focus on what it is that you're providing that's differentiated and don't focus on things outside of that. Find the right partner.
Choose the right partner. Thank you, Tom. That's very valuable. That's a refreshing take and not an angle I've heard before, to be honest, the on-prem one. It's a bit idiosyncratic compared to our competitors, but it's a deliberate choice on our part. Now, can you speak a bit to what advantages you think that provides us?
I think the industry is actually coming back to this point of view a little bit. I think there's a renewed interest in thinking about what the cloud does for us generally and how we might bring things back in-house. So when I started my career, literally there were like server racks in a back room. I remember when I had one of my first startups, we shared an office and there was like a cupboard and there was a bunch of machines in the cupboard and we used to open the window to make sure it was ventilated, right? So we've gone from that to the cloud, which is essentially just like somebody else's computer. And we've seen lots of things happen, right? Good things like simplicity, especially from an engineering point of view, but also challenges in terms of cost or complexity or even vendor lock-in, right? So you lose a lot of leverage when you go with a lot of the goodness that the cloud providers provide you because it's in their interest to make things simple and to lock you in. So I think we're seeing the industry kind of come back a little bit, not like massive swing of the pendulum, but just bringing it back a little bit to think more about on-prem. And I think to bring it back to your question, Hemo, I think Adyen is uniquely positioned there because we never moved away from it, right? We do think about SaaS and cloud as we like think about augmenting like internal productivity, some of the things that we do internally, but our production stack is built entirely on-prem in-house. And so I think that gives us a ton of advantages. So we own everything end to end. We have deep technical experts that can get into the weeds and they understand how things work. They're not calling somebody, to help them resolve something. They're not relying on an escalation path and a third-party vendor. They actually understand everything, literally from the API to the metal. And we rack our own hardware too. So they literally understand the metal as well. I think that gives us a ton of advantages in terms of both understanding, able to move quickly, problem resolution when there's incidents, but also we can control our own destiny. So when you couple that with our banking license, it gives us a ton of flexibility. We own everything end to end. We aren't relying on third parties, on vendors, on, bin sponsors or anything like that. We can do everything ourselves and that gives us a level of flexibility that I just don't think anybody else has. So this is a trend in the industry that financial players are thinking about their over-reliance on cloud and what they end up doing.
We have seen in payments over the last 2 decades, tremendous shifts. And the next, I think, paradigm shift in payments promises to be artificial intelligence. As CTO, what's your view on the role of AI in payments? What will change next? What is it today and what could it become?
I think in general, so I'll get a little bit philosophical. We're just scratching the surface, right, of what AI does. And it feels a little bit like we're kind of at the start of the hype cycle. I'm old enough to remember like studying artificial intelligence in the 90s and it was totally kind of different than what it is now. And so I remember the guy, he was a British guy that taught us. I think he'd worked in this space for like 40 years. And this is in the 90s, right?
He must have invented it.
Obviously, my math is wrong, and he's not, he's not Alan Turing. I think AI, we're just scratching the surface of what it will do. I think we're doing what humans always do, and we're kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? And there's obviously strategy behind it, but we are seeing a lot of hype right now. So the whole thing around agents and agentic workflows and things like that is like super hypey right now. Like literally this week, I've seen like 3 videos of like, oh my God, look at this awesome way of integrating with, this API. And that's cool. And I love it. And it's a space that we should be playing in, and we are. But I think we don't yet know how it's going to manifest. And then I think on the flip side, like the exact opposite to like shiny marketing is like deep technical research. And I'm not talking about like the Metas or the Anthropics or the Mistrals. I'm talking about like applied AI within financial services. So Uplift is an example where we're just kind of quietly behind the scenes, just making things awesome for customers. We're not going and talking on LinkedIn and showing some demo and giving, voiceover and essentially giving a marketing pitch, but we're in the background building really solid products based upon AI. Like a lot of fintechs, we've been doing AI and machine learning for a long time. And so this is not new to us. Again, we built our own stack, so we understand it deeply. You will see us continuing to play in that space and do more, and just providing we talk about this subscription innovation, but that's really what we're doing here, right? Like we're just providing continuous improvements that's not flashy, that's not markety. So I think that's like one bucket of where you'll see AI playing. Obviously, I think there's another one. I kind of joked about agentic workflows and things, but I do think that's really valuable, right? So how do you think about integration experience, and how do you think about improving that and making it simpler? So that's another.
Is this like an AI agent leading a merchant through it?
You want to integrate with Adyen. How do you do that? Like you've got your code base, and then you've got Adyen's APIs. So how do you build the bridge between it? So how do you build the integration? So you use MCP, say, to provide context for what Adyen's API looks like, and then magic happens. And so that kind of stuff is really cool. It simplifies like the time to integrate. Is it going to be materially differentiating over time? Maybe, I don't know. Like we're just early days here, right? There was a Chinese company that released this really cool agentic workflow, I think 3 days ago, that looks really awesome. It's got limitations. Somebody critiqued it. It has a bunch of limitations, but like these kinds of things will be really, really interesting. So I think you're going to see a lot of pervasive, to kind of use a term again from the 90s, the kind of pervasive computing where you're kind of walking through environments and the computing's happening around you, right? So you get in a car I caught a car back home yesterday from the office. It's a little easier now. I called it with my phone and I paid automatically because I'd already added my credit card. But like, imagine if I could like get a car and get in and it knows who I am because it recognizes me. Or I walk into an airport and I just go through security because—
You're talking about a driverless car now.
And just now that we have you, even though this is a podcast on embedded finance, do you think we'll have in the near future personal assistants in an AI agent form? Like if I want to book my holiday to the Adriatic coast, I can ask someone to do that for me?
Yes. We have that. The Chinese—
How soon?
Monday.
That's very cool.
No, there's so you saw the hype around DeepSeek. I wish I could remember the name of the company, but there's a Chinese company that released a video. I think it was this week. It might have been late last week. There's already a lot of work in that space. Again, they're probably going to be limited, but I think there's already a lot of really, really interesting work. And seeing as though I'm an engineer and we're talking about technology, I think I chatted actually to the CTO of a French AI company earlier this week and kind of get his point of view, how he thinks about like AI being applied to engineering in general. And one of the things that we're seeing is this notion that AI can kind of act as like a junior engineer. And so every senior engineer has like now an army of junior engineers available to them as AI. And what do we do with that? And what does that mean for engineering? And I think in engineering and in computing in general, I guess we've always had this steady increase. We've always been able to abstract away the complexity over time. And so one way to look at it, which is very superficial and naive, is that we're just abstracting away more complexity. So rather than you understanding how to do a for loop, your agent takes care of it now. And IDEs have done that for maybe decades even, but this is just an increase in that ability to abstract away the complexity. And so is it a 1 order of magnitude or 3 orders of magnitude? I guess you can debate about it, but I think it's where we're heading. And I think that's an interesting thing for us. Like, how can we leverage AI? So not just for like booking my holiday, but also for like, how do we do better work? And from our point of view, we're thinking about it as well as like, how can we simplify how we communicate and support our customers? So as an example, schemes change rules and fees all the time, and different things apply to different customers in different ways. We have like people that interpret those right now. Can we automate? As we're communicating with customers, can we give them more tailored information about things that affect them? Whether it's incidents, whether it's outages, whether it's just information about...
I like the way you talk about AI because it's much less fantastical and much more pragmatic. How we can employ it to solve some real problems here. It's interesting.
I wouldn't say I'm a fanboy per se. Am I? Like, I think it's super interesting and I'm not like discounting it either, but I think Adyen's the kind of company that actually wants to provide value to customers. And so we're not going to go and do some shiny marketing thing. We're not going to put a billboard on the side of the freeway, but
we will do a podcast.
But we will do a podcast. But we will solve problems for our customers, just to kind of get my point across here.
Thank you very much. I really like this because I think in this episode, it's interesting to get an insight into your head and how you think about scaling engineering at Adyen. It's demonstrably different from all the other episodes we've done. So it's tremendously valuable, I think. Thank you very much for joining. If there's any one last thing you'd like to add, say, highlight, or stress, please.
I don't really have a lot to add. Thanks, man. That was good.
With the big picture in mind, let's shift to the platform perspective. Welcome back to Adyen Presents Embedded Finance. We are here today with Dave Collie, Director of Engineering at Faire. Dave, hi, welcome to the podcast. If you'd like for a second, just please introduce yourself, and then can you also tell our listeners a bit about what Faire is and what you aim to change in the world?
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate Adyen having me on the podcast. So my name is Dave Collie. I'm a Director of Engineering at Faire. I've been with Faire for over 5 years, and I was very fortunate. Had the chance about 4 years ago to start a relationship with Adyen when we did our international expansion into Europe. So that's one of the reasons why I'm speaking with you here today. So Faire is a two-sided marketplace. So we have retailers who are purchasers, primarily small to medium-sized businesses. And then we have brands that are sellers, and they range in size from, very small local brands and manufacturers built and all the way up to like, national or international brands that are on our platform. And our goal is to connect those two in a wholesale marketplace. So we're connecting retailers with products they're looking for to stock their stores, mostly physical brick and mortar stores, and also provide them opportunities, value props that typically these smaller retailers wouldn't have. And
right.
These are things like,
If I can interject just to make it simpler, if I was running a little boutique, Faire is where I'd go to get all the stuff to sell in the store. And then, what are you displacing? How does it work before Faire? I would just have direct relationships with all these suppliers, and they would sort of market to me.
Yeah, one of the things that typically small retailers will struggle with is they have to go to these in-person trade shows to try to source new products. And while that might be great to maybe do once or twice a year, doing this on a regular basis to try to source new products and connect with brands can be very time-consuming, very expensive, and it can be challenging to kind of like pause your retailer store or leave it in an employee's hands for a week while you go off to some big trade show. So that's one of the things that we've kind of disrupted a bit. We still, we attend trade shows now, but we see it more as, we heavily augment that experience and let retailers have another option where they can source and try new products and build a relationship with brands they might not have encountered previously.
Right. Are you, do you consider both groups, the buyers and the sellers, so the wholesalers, the sellers and the buyers, the small, medium-sized businesses, do you consider both your customer, or are you more weighted to one of the groups?
I think we consider both like an intrinsic, essential part of the marketplace. We want to bring a great set of, supply to the marketplace with the brand side. And then we want to provide that demand on the retailer side to our brands that are, we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to connect with buyers and retailers that, maybe outside their current network and maybe outside their current actual region as well, which is one of the reasons, we expanded internationally to cover both North America and Europe, Australia, and New Zealand.
Right. And that means that if I have a little boutique in Atlanta, Georgia, I can source something from Provence in France and have something like super deluxe to offer my local customers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we want to facilitate those relationships.
Is there a limit to that ambition, or is it your idea that you color in the whole world map eventually?
I think, it's hard to tell what could be in the future, but we definitely still have ambitions to continue to expand internationally and explore opportunities that are the right for us. We've recently launched into a large portion of Eastern Europe, which we've kind of held off on previously. I don't have the exact list in front of me, but we launched another 15 countries about a month ago to kind of I think we've got almost full coverage across Europe.
Interesting. Okay, just to pivot a little bit towards payments. If you think about you've got these two groups of customers. How do payments and payouts factor into that? And what are for you the main priorities when it comes to payments?
I think the main thing is we want to meet our customers with a payment method or payment rail that they are comfortable with, and try to make it as frictionless as possible. I can maybe go back to like our, before we expanded internationally, we didn't have the same diversity of payment methods that we currently have. The US customers were retailers, and especially were very comfortable just using a credit card as like the primary payment method. And we got a very, let's say rude awakening, but
a lukewarm response. Yeah.
A lukewarm response in our expansion into Europe, just defaulting to credit cards. So, this is where, Adyen came in as a partner.
Did you a priori hypothesize that it would be, they look just like us, they'll use credit cards? Or did you think, oh, wait, maybe it's a little bit different?
We have a very diverse workforce, and we have, we had our office in London and the UK open as we kind of started to expand into Europe. So we had a pretty good idea that this was not necessarily going to have the warm reception we hoped for. It went, was relatively well received in the UK, but as we kind of expanded, especially into France and Germany, very specific and local needs for preferred payment methods. So this is something that was like very quickly became a priority to address. We want, not everyone is comfortable using a credit card, or they have another preferred payment method. I think bank transfer in particular, like SEPA and BACS in Europe.
Yeah. And how does that look via? Because I would, knowing very little about the model, it isn't ACH also very popular in the US, or are these amounts small enough that they're credit cards for you usually?
On the retailer side, it's mostly credit cards, but we do support ACH payments for retailers as well. There's some complexity there, and the risk profile is a little bit different. We, of course, ACH is a very low cost payment rail. However, getting an insufficient fund on an account, if we mistime the withdrawal, not a great experience for us. Our banking partner doesn't like that. And of course, for the retailer, that's an awful experience for them, where they maybe mistimed having the right amount of funds in there. So credit card is still our dominant payment method in the US. But on the brand side in the US, ACH is how we pay out our brands. So
okay,
that's the primarily payment rail. They want a bank transfer. They want their, they've sold their goods and they want to be paid out into their bank account.
I was just going to ask about that. And so the other side of payments, is it your strategy to pay out as quick as you can, or are you looking to monetize some of that through interest, for example, or what's the model?
Yeah, we take a commission on the brand side on sales. So that's our primary form of revenue. So we want to give brands flexibility on when they're paid out. So we offer anywhere from like a next day payout for a small fee to anywhere from like a 30 to 60 day payout, which is more typically in line with like a wholesale business to business relationship. They'll often usually invoice with like pay within 30 days, pay within 60 days. So we're trying to match that typical flow of funds for a business.
Is there an appetite to have the money faster and pay a fee for it?
There definitely are some customers that prefer to have that that flow of funds immediately after a sale into their account, so that they can make use of those funds to kind of continue to grow their business. Yeah, some do prefer that, but we do see many are very comfortable with like a 30 or 60-day payout. They, on the brand side, I think consistent sales is what they're looking for, and then an ability to kind of having consistency in their cash flow.
Yeah, and these delays, I assume, are just baked into the business model. So they might even be confused by having all that cash available, one might assume. Hey, if we can just switch to the topic of onboarding. You've got two parties, I think, to onboard onto your ecosystem. How do you assess their needs? Are they somewhat similar? Does one have more of your focus? How do you think about that?
Yeah, we look at them each as somewhat unique. On the retailer side, I think we're very focused on trying to minimize the friction of getting them on the platform and making sure that they can start to explore and discover new products and then build their first order. That's one of our huge focus, is to get them onboarded. That being said, we want to verify that they are a business, that they are qualified to make wholesale purchases, fully compliant with all the rules and regulation of their region in particular. So on the retailer side, we do go through an identity verification process, and we just try to streamline that by, asking some information on sign up, gradually asking some more information as they go through building their first order, and then using various third-party systems to validate that they are, who they say they are, or they are a valid business.
It's a bit of a staggered approach.
Yeah, it's a bit of a staggered approach. On the flip, we can pause there if we want to go deeper into that.
Just on one thing, was that designed like that from the beginning, or if I'm thinking about, let's say, I don't know, I'm a founder, I'm listening to this, I want to design my own, or did you learn a lot by trial and error initially?
We learned a lot by trial and error. I think it's, trying to adjust the friction of sign up is always like a balancing act. You can have like really strong you can get a very positive signal maybe by reducing the friction, but there can be downstream negative consequences. And potentially you onboard a cohort that has a higher percentage of retailers that maybe aren't well suited to the platform, and we want to make sure that we're bringing on people that are going to be a good fit for our brands as well.
Yeah, makes sense. And then you were going to explain about the other side of the coin.
I think on the brand side, there's a little bit more upfront friction that
right.
we're comfortable with, especially for someone who's selling. We want to make sure that we're setting them up for success by kind of clearing those hurdles early before they start, uploading their product catalog and getting their storefront on our marketplace ready. So that's
Understood.
something we go through a little bit more stricter identity verification earlier on in the setup process before they can actually activate their storefront on our marketplace.
Absolutely.
Adyen has been amazing in Europe.
Great.
That's something that we really valued the partnership there because of we used the hosted onboarding flow for our brand side to complement our own identity verification.
Yeah.
And there's very strict regulations throughout most of Europe for know your customer rules and regulations. So that was something where we could just rely on Adyen as a partner to make sure that we were fully compliant. And then,
like when Toast embeds payments, I get it. It's the restaurant offering it to the consumer. In your model, would the brand be embedding payments, or are we talking purely marketplace here?
Primarily, I think we're purely marketplace. We do have an offering called Faire Direct that our brands can use to embed in their own standalone page, but that's like redirecting to their marketplace storefront.
So you've scaled this platform of yours geographically now to quite a significant size. Can you speak a bit to the infrastructure side of things and how you've scaled that to sort of keep pace, I guess, with the business growth of the companies? And I think particularly interesting for our listeners would be any challenges you've had to overcome on the way.
I think one of the things that was really clear after we launched into Europe is the limitations of a marketplace saying have like a single region deployment. We had, all of our services deployed in the US. So any customer in Europe was doing a round trip across the Atlantic Ocean, and light can only move so fast. So the latency there, particularly on things like search and discovery, was tolerable, but it was definitely long term something that we knew was not going to be acceptable in the long term. So I think my advice there is like, when you're scaling up, especially when you start to go international and multi-region, you have to have a plan in place for which services need to start to scale beyond your current geographic location. So that was something we put a lot of effort into as we kind of launched, is to, first moving more of these services over into, data centers within Europe, so that we could start to eventually have a complete multi-region setup. So our customers were actually hitting a data center in Europe instead of going all, a round trip across the Atlantic to, an US East Coast data center.
It's interesting. It works identically, of course, on the payment side. So makes sense. You have that mirrored on the discovery side. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the sheer number of data centers and processors you need, were there any surprises there? Like did Faire hit any spikes in popularity where all of a sudden you were thinking, whoa, this is not going to be enough capacity?
I think there we are kind of fortunate that we have different scaling issues compared to like a direct-to-consumer marketplace, where we're primarily dealing with businesses. So our overall traffic scale is a little bit different compared to like a consumer marketplace. That said, we do like a twice a year Faire market where there's like site-wide discounts. Our traffic spikes dramatically during that time. And that is something where like a multi-region setup, where we had to think very carefully about the amount of traffic we would get both in Europe and the US and balance those kind of uniquely. So we're definitely very pleasantly surprised the first time we offered that in Europe with the amount of traffic that we had, but not without a few glitches. And there were some good learnings that came out of that on where we should be scaling our infrastructure in Europe.
I can imagine, yeah. And other than the localization needed when it comes to data centers, and then what we talked about earlier, so the local payment methods that are important vis-a-vis cards, are there any other elements of localization you've had to keep into account as you scale the business globally?
Yeah, one of the really important things for Faire as a marketplace is that our intention is to really facilitate discovery of local goods. So building those relationships with local to local. We do want a percentage, we do want to make it possible to have more international trade and more broader regional trade, but we want to make sure that, a retailer in Paris can connect with brands in Paris, first. So it's also critical for us that we effectively localize, like language localization, units of measurement. And we wanted it to ideally feel like, in the case of Faire is like a French website. And that was where we went through a couple different iterations of different like translation partners. And we eventually landed on a solution where we actually hired dedicated language managers to help us understand the quality of our translations and making sure they were culturally appropriate and not like a direct crude translation from English to whatever the primary language was. We're very happy with the growth that we've had across Europe, and we kind of look at each individual country to try to understand blockers for current customers and potential customers. And the learning as well for us has been that Europe, every country is very unique in their needs and expectations, and that we have to really focus on meeting those expectations to be successful. So there definitely were some good learnings, many of them in payment methods, others in like the type of products crossing borders that we should be mindful of as well. Definitely, there is the Eurozone.
As this model evolves, right, we can assume some longevity here. These parties will always need to find each other, and I think you become sort of a default option there. Do you ever think about experimenting also with financial products and look at gaming some of the payments, pay in, pay out flows? Or anything, maybe not
yes.
on your roadmap, but just give us an idea.
Yeah, one of the value props we do offer for retailers is like a net 60 payout terms or a payment term. So they can choose after a product ships to wait 60 days to pay. So that's something we're trying to be flexible in, like the payment timing, so that ideally pairing that with the product recommendations, brand recommendations we make for them, they can receive those products, sell them through in their store, and before they actually have to pay that invoice. So that's something we've had for many years. It's like a key value prop to help retailers manage cash flow. And
It's almost
from
like
that,
a faux cash advance. It doesn't quite work in the same way, but you sort of you're floating it to them, but it doesn't work like that on your balance sheet, I assume.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work the same way, but it is. We're not taking any sort of interest or anything from that. So it's not. We wouldn't think of it as a loan or a cash advance where like a typical provider would take some sort of fee. Yeah. We're just providing it as a value prop for these retailers that, and we adjust that amount based on, how long they've been with the platform and a couple other different.
And use it to sort of match it to the expectation of the what you call the brand side, who don't expect to be paid in 2 months anyway.
Yeah, that is one of the kind of like the cash flow balancing across the marketplace that can help make that work. So I think there's a huge appetite for potentially maybe more advanced or more complex financial products in general for both retailers and brands. And a lot of it, I think, stems or can be built upon kind of the anonymized aggregate data that we collect in the marketplace to try to identify what might be a good fit for maybe potentially like a short-term loan on either side. And maybe for a brand, that's so they can build up inventory in maybe a seasonal manner. And for a retailer, maybe that's so they can further stock their store. Again, maybe for seasonal reasons, preparing for like major holiday spend, like potentially extending a loan. And that's where we typically look for like a partnership with, a banking partner or a payment provider who has additional data that we can work with to understand what are the right size of those, financial products.
Exactly. Like that seems like a very intuitive thing to add to the platform. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Do you currently use payments data or other sort of data to drive how you engage with users, how you improve the platform? Is that a big part of your model, or do you use other forms of surveying?
We use we try to make use of like a variety of different sources of information, but payment information is a huge one. We want to look at individual payment methods, kind of characteristics or KPIs from default rate, chargeback is something we look at to identify how we can both provide as many payment methods as possible while also controlling our own potential risk there. So there we're looking usually like a partnership with the payment provider along with our own metrics that we collect. And then we do look at kind of very positive signals for retailers. I'm gonna say like the retailer side. And, when we have like a great track record of payment, we can extend, additional value to them, either through like increasing the amount they can put on, say, net 60, to looking at other potential value we can provide for them, like potentially like additional returns.
Really interesting. And I assume that data only gets richer the longer you're in business, so that those use cases will grow from here. Okay, then if we take Faire now, currently in the market, and your ambitions to grow, what trends and innovations are you most excited about going forward? And I would specifically personally like to ask you if part of your model and the value you offer to your customers is search and discovery. How do you look at agents?
Yeah,
inevitably.
The search and discovery experience is probably the most critical. It's something we've placed a huge focus on.
Yeah.
We have a huge team focused on, initial search and discovery, and then ongoing discovery with like between a brand and a retailer to kind of enrich their relationship. There's things we're looking at where ideally we can help retailers understand, like they often don't know that some of the brands they purchase from are on Faire. So looking at ways that we can surface that to them to let them know that this brand is actually on Faire. You could take your buying and your relationship onto Faire and get the value that we provide.
And then in that, just to convince me, like, look, I buy my wine, or I don't know, my wine rack from my favorite wine rack guy in northern France. Why would I do that on Faire if I can already do it myself? What's the upside?
Yeah, of course, you can manage all of your orders in one potential, system. You can
that's
get
useful.
Free returns on opening orders. Also potential.
You basically have more power as Faire than I do as a single buyer, I'm assuming. And you can let me have some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that we're passing along the value that we have at the scale that we have. We're only successful as a marketplace when, our retailers are making purchases they can sell in their store, and that we are bringing, a great amount of supply to our brands so that they can be successful.
And on the positive side, what do you think AI can practically do to make the Faire model better? Anything you're excited about?
Well, we've been experimenting with things like agentic buying and exploration, and it can certainly, we have like very promising experimentation we're doing where it changes the way people can search. You can have a much more natural conversation almost with an agent and start to curate, a cart or an order that is more like talking to a person who's there as like a concierge almost to help you place your order.
That's kind of great.
It's very exciting. There's definitely sharp edges we're trying to work through. It's not quite ready, I think, for a full rollout, but it's very exciting and very promising. And I think that's the direction the search component of a marketplace is going to really go in the next 6 to 12 months. I'm
absolutely not an engineer, but I would assume, being your job, that there's something in making your whole data set ready for that. That model can scrape the right bits of info. Is that fair to say? Because I notice sometimes if I dabble in my very dad way with ChatGPT, then sometimes you get sort of very shitty Reddit answers as the answer, which I can pretty much myself decipher that it's crap.
Yeah, so we have a huge team that's looking at like the data science infrastructure and making sure that the index product and brand data that we have is in a format that's very consumable for the different agent frameworks that we're working with.
Okay.
That also varies from how we process product images as well, to create a set of like embeddings that we can make it searchable from, like if you have a picture of a product, you want to extract all the key features as well as things like color and other different attributes, and have that all be searchable so that the agent can kind of look that
like
up.
The feeling that it evokes everything.
Yeah, so
that's really
that
interesting.
Requires a lot of experimentation to also weight them differently to understand what people are looking for.
And that's all your data insights. So there's no way that another model can sort of take all of that and then send people to Faire instead. How does that work?
So that is our data that we've kind of like processed out of like a brand's product catalog, and then combined with different recommendation engines we have based on purchasing behavior and how we might cut that and combine those together, and then combining that with a different AI models in like an agent framework, and tuning the context and the prompting for them to try to make consistent decisions in how they recommend products based on the inputs we're giving them.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Is there anything I forgot to ask in our chat?
I think we've covered like a lot of the things that are applicable to like scaling up a marketplace, especially when you go international, from localization, which is a really broad topic that involves both like payments and language, cultural sensitivity as well. But it's been a really fascinating journey to be a part of this at Faire, and very, very thankful that I got to do this in my career.
Absolutely. Best of luck in the future, and thanks for coming on our little podcast.
Hemmo, it's been
Have a
great
lovely
talking
day.
with you.
Thank you to our guests for sharing their insights. There's lots to digest from today's conversations, but if you take away one thing, let it be this. A scalable embedded finance strategy starts with the right partners, with key considerations including uptime you can rely on, banking licenses, global reach with local expertise, and AI-powered automation. Thank you for listening.